So now we're in 2018. Towards the middle of 2018, we hit another milestone, 20,000 members.
It just started taking off like a rocket ship.
It's going faster, John. We launched Costa Rica in 2018. Can you tell us a little bit about the connection between the number of members and the impact now that we're having? What is the comparative reason to have so many members to the fact that now we're seeing the magnitude of impact?
Well, I think we all understand that our influence only goes so far. So, I mean, by myself, my influence has limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment I partner with you, I not only have all of my people that I influence and all of my connections and all of my resources, but when I partner with you, all of a sudden I get yours. In fact, the growth is exponential because it took me a while to build mine, but when I become a partner with yours, I almost automatically get yours alongside of mine. Mm. So when you think of the John Maxwell team, as it grows, if it grows in number, it's only a matter of time till it grows in influence. And if it grows in influence, it's only a matter of time until it grows into positive change in people's life and the difference that we're always talking about. So numbers really do matter.
Yeah.
And so when we think of 160 plus countries, what that means is we have influence in 160 plus countries. When we started out, we had influence in 2 or 3 countries. And so as you become a John Maxwell, every time you become a John Maxwell team, you add by bringing yourself, but you multiply because you bring your influence and people with you. And that's what I want you to see. So if we have, 35, 40,000 John Maxwell team members, we have the influence goes into millions. And that's what it's all about.
What's that you say? You say mass movements don't start with the masses?
Yeah. The mass movements, they start with the very small. Gandhi, when he got out of prison, going to the sea for his march, he only had 6 people with him. By the time he got to the sea, he had 1 million people with him. And that's the John Maxwell team. Mass movements don't begin with the mass, but it's okay. We love the small because we had values and beliefs that would allow us to expand and get bigger. And again, Mark, when we see how big we are now, there might be a tendency for our people to say, well, it doesn't get any better than this. And I just have news for you. It gets a lot better than this.
It's a lot better.
In fact, it's easier to go from 30,000 to 100,000 than it is to go from 1 to 30,000.
My most impacting moment, and this is off point, but it is very important to the John Maxwell team. My most important impact moment of 2018 was sitting in Guatemala, 10,000 people in an arena. All the work had been pre-done by you, yes, John Maxwell team members, and you had a revelation right in the middle of speaking. Yes. Now, before I let him tell the revelation, let me tell you, in 2012, he said, I have one bucket list left. I want to see a country transformed. I want our people to be the catalyst for transformation in a country. And here's what you would say, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you'd say, hey, I'm never going to be able to see it because it's too big. But I am going to go for it because it's probably going to happen after my lifespan. And then in 2018 in Guatemala, 10,000 people there. Now you have 20,000 coaches putting legs to your legacy.
Yes.
What was that revelation?
Well, first of all, I'm a person of faith. And I wasn't talking about legacy. I wasn't talking about bucket list. I was doing what we're always doing, adding value to the people we were training, trying to make a difference for them, doing everything I can to improve their life. And in the middle of that, not thinking about legacy, bucket list, transformation of a country, I felt God speak to me very clearly and say, you're going to see transformation. And it startled me, and I'm teaching, and I'm not even thinking in that area. And I kind of hesitated for a moment, and I realized that I was hearing a voice on the inside that was giving me a picture of what was going to happen. And at the same time, I was literally training and equipping people on the inside. And so I stopped and kind of hesitated and talked to him a little bit more. And as that impression grew larger, if you'll remember, I began to weep.
Yep.
Then I began to look at him, and I shared with him that day that I was going to see transformation. And again, do you see how confirming that is when you sense that God speaks to you and says this is going to happen? And then you see how confirming it is, Mark, when this army of John Maxwell team members
Right.
just keeps growing, and it's kind of like God saying, yes, you're going to see it, and yes, I'm going to use them to deliver it.
Beautiful.
And so I'm humble, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to God, and I'm humbled about with you that you would come and be part of the, that they would become part of our John Maxwell team.
Yeah. So 2019, we're going into year 9. At the end of 2019, we crossed the 30,000 member mark, 10,000 in 1 year.
I know. Incredible.
What do you think it is about the John Maxwell team that draws people in?
I'm asked that a lot, and I ask myself that a lot too, because as we talked about at the beginning, it's much bigger than what I thought. I had the vision to know that we should do it, but I didn't see this growth this quickly. And so I asked myself, why is it that people are attracted to become a John Maxwell team player? And Mark, I think it's 3 reasons. And I think one is our training. I think the investment our faculty makes in training and developing our people, I think it's one thing to, offer you a program, but I think it's even greater when you back up the program with men and women who say, we're going to walk you through this and make sure that it happens to you. So I think that our commitment to train well with the lanes that we have is exceptional. I think, secondly, we have created what I would call a significance culture. A success culture is, look what's happening to me. A significance culture is, look what's happened in me so I can let it happen to others. And I think that I think the John Maxwell team has a culture of we're going to equip you to be really good, but we're also going to equip you to serve other people. And I think people really long for that culture. I mean, think about it. Is there anything better than being in a large group of people who believe what you believe, have the values that you have, and encourage you? And there's a lifting, encouraging, vibrant, self-perpetuating environment, I think, that we've created in our culture. And then I think the third reason, and I make it third because I want to be careful with it, is I think the name.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a good name.
Yep.
And I think that name, John Maxwell, opens doors for you, honestly, that without it, that door doesn't open. And by the way, it's been my honor and privilege to do that. I mean, I've worked hard to open doors. And now what really brings me great excitement and pleasure and pride in the right way is the fact that I can look at people all the time and say, I've opened a door for them. Yeah. And then they go, and then what makes great, the John Maxwell team members, they go in and they not only go through that door, but then they serve and add value. And then people come and say, let me tell you what your John Maxwell team people are doing. So it's kind of like, I opened the door, but because you did good work, you got to stay in there and help people.
I want to talk on this subject, how to be a leader that people love to follow. Now, I think one of the reasons I teach on that is, Sonny, you and Cam are leaders that people love to follow. I know that. They love you. They love your leadership. They love how you not only know the way and go the way, but you really kind of show the way as a leader. And so when I thought about you and what you're trying to accomplish, I thought about this subject, but then I have to admit to you that when I teach this today, it becomes very personal to me. And let me just give you the context and explain it. My father passed away on July the 4th, okay? He was 98 and a half years of age, an amazing man, an amazing leader. And so when I'm working on this subject of what is it about a leader that people love to follow him or her, I immediately began to think of my dad. And I began to think about the fact that he was very successful in life and was a college president for 20 years. And he just, as a leader, just inspired people, and they loved him and they loved to follow him. I love to follow him. He was my lifelong mentor. And so I'm kind of dedicating this lesson, if it's okay with you, I'm dedicating it to my dad. And in so doing, there'll be a few times I'll maybe pull out a story of Dad to share with you of how he was that type of leader that people love to follow. And of course, my goal is to teach this in such a practical, simple way that you become a leader that people will love to follow you. Because if you think about it, just think about it for a moment. Think about all of your work experiences, okay? As you really give it thought, haven't there been leaders in your life that they just inspired you and lifted you, and you could pretty much just hardly wait to get to work because you knew when you got to work that good things were going to happen and relationships were strong. And we all know people that we just love to follow. And then is it not true that in our experiences we've also had leaders that we didn't love to follow? We probably had leaders that we didn't love. We probably had leaders that didn't love us. So what does it take? What does it take to be a leader that people love to follow? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, I start this lesson by a survey. It's a fairly recent survey. 4,000 people. In this survey were people that were leaders, supervisors, bosses, okay? And there were also people that were not. They were just on the team. And so it went out, and the survey asked one question, and the question was, what do you think is the best way to improve yourself as a leader? Now, what makes this survey interesting to me is that the leaders answered the question differently than the followers. In fact, the two groups weren't even close. The leaders, the people that were supervisors, they said, well, to improve our leadership, we need to be better in technology, and we need to be better in finances. Now, I'm going to call a timeout right now because I know I'm talking to ITT Design and customers, clients, and friends. And I know technology is your world. So when I give you this survey illustration, in fact, I was kind of amused when I thought about putting it in here, thinking about you, and maybe one of the ways for you to improve your leadership is technology. So I want to be careful here, but please just give me a little space. Let me have a little bit of fun. This survey wasn't to a technology company, and basically they were asking the leaders how they could improve their leadership, and they said technology and a better understanding of finances. When they asked the people that were on the team that were not in leadership positions, what do the leaders of your company need to do to improve their leadership? They gave two total different answers. They said, first of all, they need to become better leaders. They need to increase their leadership skills. And secondly, they need to have greater emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to call a timeout here because we've already got a problem before I ever even dive into the lesson. And the problem is very simple. The leaders and the team players aren't on the same page. But it's been my understanding in leadership for years as I've helped companies and done my very best to lift the leadership lid. It's been my understanding for years that very seldom are the leaders and the followers on the same page. And I say that because I think one of the major mess-ups in leadership is what I call assumptions. In fact, I say assumptions is the mother of all mess-ups. And assumptions, the assumption gap is the gap between what I think is true and what is truly true. But what do I think? Does it match the reality? You know, Max Dupree said the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And what I find is that many leaders lead by assumption. They think they know where their people are. They think they know what the people need. And it's not true at all. And so I share that with you because this survey was certainly a billboard for assumption, because the leaders said, well, the way we can improve our leadership is through technology and through finances, and the people on the team, the other side said, no, you can improve your leadership by becoming a better leader, and you can improve your leadership by becoming emotionally intelligent. And by the way, when they said improve your leadership, basically, leadership asked the question, where are you taking me? And emotional intelligence asked the question, how are you treating me? And basically, the people on the team, they said, where are you taking us? And how are you treating us? And I think this is just Such an important lesson for me. I hope it's an important lesson for you. And by the way, the title of the lesson is How to Be a Leader That People Love to Follow. It is not entitled How to Be a Leader That People Love. I'm not talking about a popularity contest. I am talking about respect. But respect is always earned on difficult ground. And in our social media culture, where we want to know how many likes we have, we're developing a whole bunch of leaders that aren't leaders at all. They basically are poll takers. So what I'm going to share with you really, really works. So I asked myself, if I'm following a leader that I love, what do I feel? What are my feelings? When I describe that leader that I love to follow, what comes from my heart? Why is it that I love him so much? And I think that there are three feelings that followers always have if they have a leader that they love. And let me give you those three feelings, and then let me teach. I think that if you follow a leader that you love, you always feel valued. I think that's at the core. If I'm following a leader that I love, I can tell you for a fact that I feel valued by that leader. Secondly, I think I feel inspired. There's something lifting about their leadership that I'm inspired when I'm around them. I've had mentors like that. John Wooden, who was the great coach at UCLA, mentored me for several years. And I said, it's wonderful what the coach says, but it's more wonderful just to experience the coach. He inspired me. And I think when you follow a leader that you love, you not only feel inspired and valued, I think you feel empowered. So the question is, how do we develop a culture where people feel valued, inspired, and empowered? That's the question. It's a great question. Think about it for a moment. If in your company, those three feelings consistently exist, people are feeling valued, they're feeling inspired, they're feeling empowered, wouldn't you say that you had a great culture? So what kind of a leader creates that culture? Because I want to say something I think that is very important. When people join a company, when they become a part and they're hired or employed into an organization, it's the company that usually hires them. So they're brought in by the company. But when people leave an organization or a company, they don't leave an organization, they leave a leader. Always. It's a leader that either didn't value them, didn't inspire them, or didn't empower them, that when they leave the company, they don't leave the company, they leave a person. And so it's very important for you and I to know how to have those characteristics and qualities that we are leaders that people just love to follow in our life. So how do I have the people on my team always feel valued, inspired, and empowered? Let's go. Number one. As leaders, we need a heart to care. If we have a heart to care, this will convey value to our people. Maya Angelou, who was an author, a philosopher, a thinker, a speaker, I'll bet every one of us in this room today have either read something or been inspired by something that Maya said or wrote. It was my privilege, maybe 10 or 11 years ago, in Boston to do a conference with her. And I was so excited because I admired her so much, and she lived up to all of her reputation. She was a great lady. It was Maya Angelou who said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. She is so right on target. We may forget what a person said. We may even forget what they did, but we will always remember how that leader made us feel. And when I thought about that statement, and when I thought that leaders have a heart to care and they value the people that they lead. I thought, okay, let me see if I can get this as solid as I possibly can, so you can get your hands on it and your feet can stand on it, and it will really hold you. It's good and secure. So let me see if I can help you. I think there are 4 words that show that you have a heart to care. I think there are 4 words that show that I have a heart to care. And the 4 words are these: I notice, you matter. Those are the 4 words that if we express them often enough, if we live them often enough, trust me, the people around us will feel valued. Again, I said earlier, I think that when people leave an organization, they don't leave the organization, they leave the leader, and they leave the leader many times because they don't feel valued. When I have one of my team members around me, especially when they're kind of new to me and I haven't been with them very long, I let them know how much I value them. In fact, I tell them that the very fact that they're on my team, I've put a 10 on their head. And what I learned a long time ago is we view people by the way we value people. You see, if I value you as important, I view you as important. Our values of people and our views of people never separate. It's not, I don't view you as unimportant as if I value as important. The values and the views have to come together. And I tell them all the time, I say, I put a 10 on your head. In fact, I tell people, the only way that the 10 can ever be removed is if you take it off. If you make a decision to take a 10 off and put a 5 on, then I'll have to live with your decision. But my decision is to see you as you can become, to value you and your potential, to put a 10 on your head. That's my choice. But when I say to you, I notice, and you matter, I just want you to know, I've noticed that what you're doing over there in the department, and I tell you, it matters and you matter. There's something that is just absolutely uplifting by those 4 words. And somebody asked me the other day, said, well, how do I show that I notice and I matter? And the answer to you is very simple. Appreciate a person more than you think they should be appreciated. Value a person more than you think they should be valued. See a person higher than they can see themselves. You see, it's wonderful when people believe in their leader, but it's even more wonderful when the leaders believe in their people. And when you begin to up your appreciating people as far as your exercises, in other words, when you feel like, boy, I've really shown appreciation to that person, double it. Boy, I've really shown appreciation to that department. Double it. That's how you know that they matter and that you notice them. My dad, going to my dad now, and I'm doing this lesson in honor of him. And by the way, so many of you wonderful folks, I had a lot of people say, well, wow, I'm sorry you lost your dad. And I just want you to know that I didn't lose him because I know where he is. He was a person of faith. He's with his Father. He's with his Heavenly Father. I know exactly where he is. I didn't lose him. You see, you only lose a person if you don't know where they are. But he did leave me. But he left me with so many incredible teachings and memories. And one of the things that I'll never forget when you talk about valuing people is when my father was president of Ohio Christian University. By the way, that was my first university. That was my first college. And I went there because Dad was president. And I thought, hey, if you really want to get through school, go to where your dad's the president. You just increase the odds. And so anyway, one of my favorite times to be with Dad would be during college year. And my father would be in the offices and he knew when the maybe the major break is between classes. And he always would, when he knew that there was going to be students moving across the campus, if possible, he went out on the campus himself. And he would say to me, sometimes I'd be there with him, he'd say, son, let's go. The kids are about to leave their classes and walk across the campus and go with me. And I knew what that meant. That meant that he was going to walk slowly through the crowd, that he was going to walk slowly through the student body, and he knew them by name. And when they would pass, he would call them by name, and he would say, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Are you adjusting okay to school? How are your classes? And he would get a conversation going with them. He called it walking slowly through the crowd. And it could take him, 30 minutes to walk 50 yards, because he wanted the students to know that he noticed them and they mattered. And in that conversation, he always would ask this question. He would say, is there something I can do to help you? And sometimes, not all the times, not even most of the time, but sometimes a student might say, well, yes, and they might share a thought with him or something he could do to help them. And my dad always carried a 3x5 card in his pocket. He'd reach in his pocket, he'd pull out that 3x5 card, and with a pen, he'd write down the student's name and what he needed to do to help that student. And then he'd say, now I'll go make sure that you get that help. And he'd have a list. And I mean, when the students all went back to class, he would go back and get his staff together and say, okay, this student needs this. A student could use some help here. And my dad was just amazing. And the students, knowing that Dad would be on the campus, were looking for him. And it would start with a couple or one or two. And sometimes there was no walking slowly through the crowd at all. It was just standing in the crowd, because they would gather around him. And for maybe 5-8 minutes, he'd hold court and say, I notice and you matter. So to apply this first thought to our lives, the question I have for you is, do your people notice that they matter to you? And how do you know that they know that? And what do you do that makes them know that? And maybe even more important, what are you going to do this week to say to the people on your team, I notice and you matter? In other words, I have a heart to care. I value you. The second thing that leaders do really well, they do this really well. Again, that this characteristic it just gives love to the people that follow. Leaders, as leaders, we need a passion to inspire our people. And I choose the word inspire very carefully, because there's another word I use a lot in in leadership, and it's the word motivate. In fact, I wrote a book just recently on the leader's greatest return, and I have a whole chapter on the 7 motivations of people that leaders need to know so that they can lead people best. But instead of saying that we need a passion to motivate people, I said we need a passion to inspire. Let me just give you, it's a small difference, but let me give you the difference between motivating people, which we have to do as leaders. We have to move them, and inspiring people. When I motivate people, that implies to a certain extent that I'm pushing you. Not pushing you aggressively, but I'm slowly nudging and pushing you to do something that perhaps you don't want to do, okay? I'm kind of working from the outside to get you to do something perhaps on the inside. There's a gentle push, okay? I'll explain that in a moment. And when I inspire you, instead of pushing, I'm pulling. I motivate you, I push you. When I inspire you, I pull out of you stuff that is already within you, things that you naturally can do or are good at, but you just need to be led to do it. So get the fine difference between the two, because the question I think as leaders we have often is, when do I push and when do I pull? I have, in fact, I had a very well-known college basketball coach ask me that question when I was mentoring him recently. He said, John, when do I push my players? When do I pull my players? Well, you push your players, your team. Remember, that's motivating. When they need to do things that they're required to do in their job. I mean, there are some things that they don't like to do in their job, just like there are some things you don't like to do in your job. So you have to kind of be pushed to maybe do the things that we don't like to do. You push in the area of teamwork because some people don't want to play team ball. I think you sometimes have to push in the area of servanthood because some people don't naturally want to serve. I think always with culture, with values, with vision, there's a constantly pushing them in front of making sure that whatever is, they need to be kind of gently persuaded to go that way. The flip side of it is what do I pull out of people? What do I inspire people to do? I pull out their strengths. I pull out their natural gifts and their temperament. I pull out their motivations, the things that kind of motivate them. I pull out their passion. I pull out their purpose. In other words, when I inspire people, I kind of reach inside of you and I pull out of you things that you are naturally inclined to do, but may not do if I don't lead well. And the word passion, the leaders that people love to follow, they have a passion to inspire people. I love that because that passion means that they energize you, they maximize you. This is huge. When I teach mentoring, one of the lessons I teach, I think that's so helpful to people is who mentors you is as important as what they say. Now, what they say is that incredible knowledge and information, insights that you need to have in a mentoring relationship. But the contagiousness of mentoring is in the who. As I said earlier about Coach John Wooden, better than hearing what John Wooden had to teach, you just experienced John Wooden. And I left feeling inspired. You see, I learned a long time ago, big people always make you feel bigger. By the way, small people always make you feel smaller. Remember Mary Angelou, who said, Maya Angelou, who said, people, you're not going to remember what they said, you're not going to remember what they did, but you are going to remember how they made you feel. And so when my father passed away, a couple days before he passed away, I spent alone with him for a few hours. And at this time, he couldn't respond at all to me. But as you know, when people are dying, listening, they can hear. That sense stays with them longer than the other. And so I sat beside Dad, and on my iPhone, I began to put down the lessons that my dad had taught me. And every time I put a lesson down, I'd stand up and put my hand maybe on his face or his head or his shoulder and just love on him. And I'd say, Dad, you taught me this lesson. When I finished my hours with him that day, the last day I had with him while he was still alive, I had put in my iPhone 29 lessons that my dad taught me. And if you go to, I think, johnmaxwell.com, I think you can get those lessons. I teach them. I think I've taught them in 4 consecutive weeks on tribute to my dad or my father. You may be able to pick them up. I hope you can. 29 lessons. Here's the point. Every one of those lessons, he not only taught me those lessons through his words, he showed me those lessons through his actions. In fact, his actions weighed more heavily than his words. He lived all of the lessons for me to see. That's important because people do what people see. So the question, if you're going to be a leader that people love to follow, are you inspiring them? Are you inspiring them by your example? Can you do what a great leader always does? Look at the people that you lead and say, follow me. And they gladly get up and follow you because there's an inspirational quality there in your life. So the question that I have to ask about myself, and you need to ask about yourself, is very simple. What am I doing to inspire my team? How do I inspire my team? Do my team members feel inspired? Have I asked them, do I inspire you? And what can I do right now to inspire my people? Okay, let's go to the third thing that leaders do very well that cause their followers to love to follow them. And that is that we need a willingness to empower people. Now, this is a lesson in itself, and I only have a few minutes with it and for it, but I want to contrast empowerment, releasing people to reach their capacity and help the company reach its capacity. There's the opposite of empowerment is command and control. And I just want you to know that that insecure people love command and control. Anybody that is insecure wants to have their hands on everything and they control everything. And I just want you to know that if you're a command and control person, there's a limitation to the growth of your company, always, not sometimes, always, because it will only grow to the level that you can personally command and control. And the moment that you have to release that to someone else, you get a problem. So you can't have constant continual growth and command and control at the same time. You got to make a decision. If I'm going to have that constant growth, then I have to be an empowering leader. I do a lot of work internationally. I think last year I was maybe 30 countries. I do a lot of work internationally, and one of the weaker parts of leadership internationally so many times is that leaders delegate task, but they don't delegate authority. And let me just say this, it's quite simple. If you delegate task, you'll never develop leaders. You'll just develop followers. And I see it happen all the time, because you give them a job to do, they go do it, and they come back, and you give them another job, and they do it, and they come back, and then you give them another job. All you're doing is you're developing a follower. They come back and go out, come back. To be honest with you, it's like playing fetch with your dog. I mean, you get a ball and you throw the ball out, the dog goes, runs after it, gets it, comes back, gives it to you, throw it back out, dog comes back, throw it back out, dog comes back. Most leaders, that's how they run their business. They're just delegating tasks and next, and they're just busy delegating tasks. And all they got is a bunch of followers. You see, if you want to develop leaders, you got to delegate authority. And that's how leaders get established. I began to think about this because I think empowerment is difficult for a lot of people. So in doing this lesson, I just wrote down, because of time, 3 empowerment indicators. Let me give them to you. How do you know that you are an empowering leader? I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can know that you are. 1, the only decisions you make are the decisions only you can make. That's very insightful. You see, decisions should be made at the lowest level possible in an organization, not the highest level possible in the organization. If you're making all the decisions, you're not an empowering leader. And so you begin to share those decisions with others. Another empowerment indicator is that team members are always creating ideas and opportunities. In other words, you're not the only one that's creating the opportunities. I run into leaders sometimes say, boy, if I don't make it happen, nothing happens. Can I tell you something? If you're one of those people that it only happens if you make it happen, you're not an empowering leader. Your people ought to have that authority to create, make mistakes, and try again. Thirdly, trust is the foundation of an empowering leader. That an empowering leader trusts his or her people. And again, I run into people that say, well, how can you know if you can trust your people? And I always smile because that's a simple question to answer. My name's John, I'm your friend. It's this simple. The best way to find out if you can trust a person is to trust a person. And what you're going to discover by their actions is if they're trustworthy or not. And by the way, if you don't trust someone, you're either too controlling and haven't given up that trust, or you've got the wrong person, which means you've got to make a change. You've got to either change from command and control to empowerment, or you got to change the person because they're the wrong one. I want to talk to you about the best advice that I ever received. And then I want to pass it on to you if I titled this lesson. I've never done this lesson. I wrote it just for you, to be honest with you. If I entitled the lesson, I would call it the best thing you can do for yourself and for others, okay? When I graduated from college, my father, who happened to be the president of the first college I graduated from, I sat down with him. I was getting ready to begin my life, my calling. And I asked him for advice, and what he told me was the best advice I ever received, and this is going to be the core of the lesson. He said to me, John, if you want to be successful, 3 things you need to do every day. Value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people. He said if you'll do those 3 things, you'll always have people follow you. You'll always be a person of influence because it's all about people. And people, most of them don't feel valued. Few of them ever have anyone that really believes in them. And he said hardly anyone has anyone that unconditionally loves them. And I have taken that advice. Value people, believe in people, unconditionally love people. And in every book I write, I take it through that grid. Every teaching I take, like today, I take it through that grid. I continually remember that in everything I do and everything that I am, I value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love them. Now, my father just died July 4th of this year. He was 98 years of age. The day before he died, I was with him, just the 2 of us alone. And we spent a few hours together, and I began to talk to him about lessons that he had taught me. In fact, that day on my iPhone, I literally would put down a lesson he would teach me, and then I'd say, now, Dad, this is what you taught me, and this is how I've applied it to my life. And there were 29 lessons. The other day, I was reviewing those 29 lessons that my dad taught me, and I think it's, let me count them on my pad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 of those 29 lessons were about relationships, about either valuing people, believing in people, and unconditionally loving people. And I'm going to give them to you just quickly. This is not the meat of the lesson. One of the lessons that my father taught me were things such as encourage others, walk slowly through the crowd, see the best in others, remember their names, travel the high road, express gratitude to and for others, unconditionally love them. And when I looked at these lessons that he taught me in life, what was huge was this, that he understood the value of people, and he understood how to give value to people. Now, there's a relationship, I think, between understanding the value of people and also at the same time understanding how to add value to people. I have a coaching company. It's only 10 years old, but it's now the largest coaching company in the world. I think we have like 35,000 members in about 168 countries of the world. So that's pretty fast growing for 10 years. And when we bring these coaches together every 6 months, we have these major 3-day conferences where we especially bring in new coaches, people that just signed up to be part of our team, the John Maxwell team. And we bring them together, and every time we do, every 6 months, I have this about an hour and a half lecture called JMT. That stands for John Maxwell Team DNA. And I take them through what is the DNA of a John Maxwell team member, because I want them to understand this is who we are. We are creating a culture of people that really add value to people. And the first thing I teach them is this, and I want you to catch it, that we are people of value who value people, and we add value to them. I'm a person of value, but I'm on this teaching call with you today because I value you. I value who you are, what you've done. I value Stephen. I value Erica, all the people that lead your organization. I'm a person of value that values you. So what is the best result? The best result of all of this is that I add value to you. If I value myself and I value you, there's an automatic action that I take, and that is that I value you. And the best thing that you can do for yourself and the best thing that you can do for others is to value yourself, value people, and then add value to them. You see, I wrote another book called Winning with People. And in it, I have what I call people principles. And one of the people principles is what I call the elevator principle, which basically says we either, like an elevator, we either lift people up or we bring people down. And in fact, I could basically summarize any kind of relationship teaching in almost one sentence, and it would be something like this. You and I are either a plus in people's lives or we are a minus in people's lives. We're either adding value to them or, to be honest with you, we're taking a little piece from them. That's just the way it is. And again, this is huge, because when I think about the best thing I could do for myself and the best thing I can do for you is I can value myself and I can value you, because if I can do those two things, if I am a person of value and you're a person of value, then my next response is that I'm going to add value to you. So how do I do that? How does that happen? So let me give you just my little 5-step everyday process of adding value to people. Here we go. Number one, I value people, okay? I go back to the golden rule. Treat others as I want to be treated. So every day I make sure that the core of everything I do is based on the fact that I value people. And the reason that's so important, especially for leaders, is leaders see more than others see, and leaders see before others see. And because of that, because I see more than most people and because I see before other people, this gives me a very distinct advantage over other people. Trust me, in life, if you can see more and you can see before, you're going to win the race. So the question is, what do I do with that advantage? What do I do with the advantage I can see more and I can see before? I can either use it for personal gain or I can use it for your gain. I can either manipulate you, which means I move you for my advantage, or I can motivate you, which means I move you for your advantage and personal and mutual advantage. So I'm either going to be a plus or a minus, and I'm going to be a plus or minus with people based on the fact that I value those people. If I value you, I'm going to be a plus. If I don't value you, to be honest with you, or if I don't even value myself, I'll be a minus. I'm either adding or I'm subtracting. So every day I value people. The second thing I do every day is I think of ways to add value to people. In other words, I look at my calendar in the morning. On my calendar day in the studio, I knew I would be talking to a lifestyle publication. So what am I doing? Before I ever get here in our teaching lesson, I'm thinking of ways I can add value to you. I'm thinking ahead. I'm intentionally saying I'm going to be with you today. What can I say to you that is going to be a plus in your life, so that when I'm done, you say, wow, John just moved us a little bit further down the road. This is huge. So, when I look at my calendar, I ask myself, who will I see? Oh, I'm going to see Lifestyle Publication today. And what can I do? What can I do to add value to you? In fact, one of the things I felt that I could add value to you today was to do a kind of a unique lesson just for you, because I know how much you value people in your publication and the whole intent of why you do what you do. A few years ago, I wrote a book, Intentional Living. And we have 5 grandchildren, and I was working on teaching my grandchildren how to be intentional in adding value to people. So I was having dinner with all 5 of my grandchildren, and I was asking what they were going to do the next day at school to add value to people. And our youngest grandson, at that time, I think James was 9, said, Papa, tomorrow when I go to school, I'm going to open doors for people. If I'm near a door and people are coming out, I'm going to rush ahead. I'm going to open the door. And when they pass through, I'm going to smile and I'm going to say, have a good day. I said, oh, James, I like that. The next evening, he called me and said, Papa, I had a great day. I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, remember I was going to open doors and, tell people to have a great day. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember it well. He said, well, I did that. I did that all day. He said, I opened up 47 doors for people today. And smiled and said, have a great day. Now, James is 9, and he's already learning to think ahead of how he's going to add value to people. I want to encourage all of you to look at your calendar, what you're doing tomorrow, see who you're going to see, and ask yourself a very simple question. When I'm with them, what can I do that would add value to them? Wow. Number 3, I not only value people and think of ways to add value to people. But number 3, I look for ways. I look for ways to add value to them. In other words, when I'm with you, I'm constantly looking and saying, what can I do right now to add value to this individual? Wow. Because here's what I know. Who I am determines what I see. Just like who you are determines what you see. If I'm a person of value who values people and wants to add value to people, guess what? I'm going to see all kind of opportunities to add value to you. Why? Because that's who I am. I don't see what's before my eyes. There's a whole bunch of things before my eyes I don't see. I see what I'm prepared to see. And how I view others is how I view myself. Now, this is huge. So how do I do this? How do I look for ways to add value to people? Well, I love to play golf when I'm on a golf course. One of my desires is to find somebody that's working the ground. Maybe somebody's raking the traps, the maintenance people. And I intentionally separate myself from the other golfers for a moment. I go over and introduce myself, and I thank them for their hard work and how beautiful they make the course. And then I give them a financial, I just slip them some money and say, hey, take your family out to eat today. And my name's John, I'm your friend. And I move on. If I'm in a restaurant, especially if it's a single mother or if it's an elderly person, I make sure that I really, give them a great tip. In fact, during COVID-19, I just tip 50% of the meal anymore right now because I know everybody's having a very tough time. Now what I'm just saying is you want to be conscious and look for ways that you can begin to add value to the people around you. These are people I don't even know. In fact, every day I make it intentional that I give something to somebody that doesn't know me at all. I can't benefit at all from them. Okay, the first question I ask anybody that I do know is, how can I help you? What can I do? So every day I value people. Every day I think of ways to add value to people. Every day I look for ways when I'm with them to add value to people. And number 4, every day I do things that add value to them. I not only think and look, but I actually do things. In fact, I ask myself every night, who did I add value to? And how did I add value to them? And I always have a goal, and this is a simple goal, but it's really good. I want to be the first to add value to people. When you're first, you set yourself apart from everyone else. I watch people in the crowd often hesitate, and I often think, if you wait till everybody else does something good before you do something good, it's still good, but you get lost in the crowd. Be the first to help. Be the first to add value. I try, and so I become a person of action. So when I see that there's action needed, while other people are asking themselves, should I do this? I've already made up my mind because I prepared my mind. My mind has already been made up. My mentor John Wooden used to say, John, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So I've already made my mind. So every day I value people, think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people, do things to add value to people. And finally, number 5, every day I encourage others to add value to people. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now. For all of you of Lifestyle Publications, I'm encouraging you to now begin to follow this process because it's the best thing you can do for yourself, but it's also the best thing that you can do for others. I encourage you to be a person of significance, not just a person of success. Now, success is wonderful, it's important, but success is pretty much about me. It's very personal. It's how well I do in life and how well I provide for my family and my home and it's all about me. Significance is all about others, and I want to encourage you to become a person of significance. As you're in this incredible world of publication, I want to encourage you to constantly, intentionally add value to other people. I've known a lot of successful people that were not happy, but I've never met a person that does significance, that literally pours their life into others, that they're all fulfilled. They're all having a sense of inner deep satisfaction because they know it's not about them. In fact, Stephen talked about our training of leaders around the world, and we have a fairly large international presence. And in one of my companies, one of my nonprofit organizations, we do transformation through values training in other countries. We're only going to the country when we're invited by the president. We're in 3 countries now. We're getting ready to go into 2 more countries. We have 22 presidents that have already requested us to come in to be with them. And so I take my coaches on these trips. These coaches, they pay their way because they want to add value to people. They want to do what this teaching's all about because they know it's the best thing to do for themselves, the best thing to do for others. And so we go to train these facilitators of these transformation tables. We'll go in 5 days, train 20, 25,000 facilitators. And I tell my coaches, I say, okay, now you've come to add value to people. You're living this life of significance. It's a beautiful thing. I said, but let me tell you this, by the end of the 5 days, you'll know that they added more value to you than you added value to them. While you gave yourself, while you lost yourself in them, you found yourself. Hi, John Maxwell here. On July 4th, my father passed away. And what I'm going to do is share with you a tribute to my dad. And it's the lessons that he taught me. He lived for 98 years and 8 months. And the first one I want to start with is what I'm really known for, but it's what I learned. It's what I observed. It's who my father was. And the lesson that my dad taught me to do was just basically add value to people. Every day, my dad got up for one purpose, and that is to make a day better for someone else, to lift them, to love them, to pour into them. And every day when my dad would put his head down at the pillow at night, there would be no doubt people that would come to his mind that he knew that he had contributed in a positive way to their life. I often talk about in relationships how that we're either a plus or a minus in our relationships. In other words, I'm either adding value to you, or to be honest with you, if I'm selfish and kind of into self-centeredness, I probably wear you out and take value from you and kind of, you see me coming and think, oh my gosh, I'm feeling bad already. Well, my father was not a plus in people's lives. He was a plus in people's lives. Often when I'm in conversation with people, like at dinner, I love to ask questions. And one of the questions I love to ask is, what's the best advice that you ever received and who gave it to you? And the best advice that I ever received was when I graduated from college and I sat down with my father and I asked him to just give me what he thought would be the best career advice. How can I just do well? And I'll never forget, he said, John, 3 things. If you'll do these 3 things, I promise you'll do well. And what he shared with me that day, I have carried with me my entire life. And every time I teach, every time I write, every time I lead, I put it through the grid that my dad gave me that day. And I have found that it is absolutely the best advice I ever received. And here's what he said. He said, John, every day, value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people. Those 3 things. He said, John, every day value people because most people go through life and they've not been truly valued. Because they've not been truly valued, sometimes they don't even have the value that they have for themselves that they should have. So he said, lift people by letting them see not only who they are, which is already valuing people, but who they can become. He said, believe in people. Just look at people and believe the best, think the best, receive the best. He said, always stay in the best with people. He said, we are all human. Every one of us have our worst side. Wow. I mean, let's just talk about it for a moment, that there's probably a day in your life and in my life that we hope nobody ever knows about. I mean, we don't always operate on top level, but my father taught me that the best way to get people to live the best life is to believe in them. And then thirdly, he said, and this is the clincher, he said, unconditionally love them. He said, I could almost promise you, as you speak, as you lead, as you write, I can almost promise you that the person that you are communicating with has never been unconditionally loved. I mean, just loved, period. No strings attached. But he said, if you'll unconditionally love them, they'll immediately feel it, they'll experience it, And he said, John, you will be a people magnet. People want to be around you because no one else gives them that unconditional love feeling. Incredible advice. We've all heard this statement that people will forget what you said. They'll even maybe forget what you did. But they won't forget how you made them feel. Unconditional love makes people feel something that no other way or other person can ever be given to them. It's a fact. And so I took my dad's advice, and I just value people, believe in people, unconditionally love them. I do that for you, but I do that for everyone. And I have found that that was the greatest advice I've ever received, and hopefully it'll help you. Often when I'm in conversation with people, like at dinner, I love to ask questions, and one of the questions I love to ask is, what's the best advice that you ever received and who gave it to you? And the best advice that I ever received was when I graduated from college, and I sat down with my father and I asked him to just give me what he thought would be the best career advice. How can I just do well? And I'll never forget, he said, John, 3 things. If you'll do these 3 things, I promise you'll do well. And what he shared with me that day, I have carried with me my entire life. And every time I teach, every time I write, every time I lead, he said, John, every day value people because most people go through life and they've not been truly valued. Because they've not been truly valued, sometimes they don't even have the value that they have for themselves that they should have. So he said, lift people by letting them see not only who they are, which is already valuing people, but who they can become. He said, believe in people. Just look at people and believe the best, think the best, receive the best. He said, always stay in the best with people. He said, we are all human. Every one of us have our worst side. Wow. I mean, let's just talk about it for a moment, that there's probably a day in your life and in my life that we hope nobody ever knows about. I mean, we don't always operate on top level, but my father taught me that the best way to get people to live the best life is to believe in them. And then thirdly, he said, and this is the clincher, he said, unconditionally love them. He said, I could almost promise you, as you speak, as you lead, as you write, I can almost promise you that the person that you are communicating with has never been unconditionally loved. I mean, just loved, period. No strings attached. But he said, if you'll unconditionally love them, they'll immediately feel it. They'll experience it. And he said, John, you will be a people magnet. People want to be around you because no one else gives them that unconditional love feeling. Incredible advice. We've all heard this statement that people will forget what you said. They'll even maybe forget what you did. But they won't forget how you made them feel. Unconditional love makes people feel something that no other way or other person can ever be given to them. It's a fact. And so I took my dad's advice, and I just value people, believe in people, unconditionally love them. I do that for you, but I do that for everyone. And I have found that that was the greatest advice I've ever received, and hopefully it'll help you. I'm sure it will. The second lesson that my father taught me, this is a faith lesson, but this is an incredible teaching, is he taught me to pray without ceasing. In other words, continually pray. I shared with you earlier that many of the lessons my father taught me were more his actions than his words. And this is one of them for sure, that if you grew up around my father, Melvin Maxwell, one thing that you very quickly caught was that he had an ongoing conversation with God. And I love that phrase, ongoing conversation with God. You see, a lot of my faith friends, they would set aside time, which I think is good, to spend with God. And my father said, that's good, son. But he said, why would you just take a little bit of time and just spend it with him when, in honesty, you could spend all day with him? He never leaves you. He never forsakes you. He sticks closer to you than a brother. He always is ready to hear you, listen to you, minister to you, add value to you. So he said, John, just have an ongoing conversation with him. My father taught me to make prayer, instead of something that is formal and something that maybe has a box or a place, he just taught me to talk to God. Sentence prayers, not long. In fact, many times as my father would walk around the house, he would just say things like, God, I just really appreciate how. And I would just listen to him, and then he would move on to something else. And those sentence prayers throughout the day shared with me and showed me that he did something with what one of the old saints, Thomas à Kempis, would say. He practiced the presence of God. I learned to do that. And I can tell you that is the greatest spiritual asset in my life. I have ongoing, continual conversations with God. Not formal, not long, not complicated, just from my heart. Where I am, what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, what I'm encountering at that moment. And I have found great spiritual relief and developed great spiritual muscle in just knowing that he's right beside me. And by the way, he's right beside you too. In fact, I have had many of my wonderful friends who, some of them don't even believe in God, and they'll say, well, you mean he's beside me? Yeah, he's beside you. See, he's beside you whether you believe in him or not. It's like I told one of my dear, wonderful, one of my favorite atheist friends, I just said, I know you don't believe in God, but you sure do miss him, don't you? Of course you miss him. You were created to know him. You were created to spend time with him. And my father teaching me to pray without ceasing, invaluable in my spiritual journey with him. It's a lesson that I'll carry with me all my life. It's a lesson he taught me, but now, today, it's a lesson that I live. The third area that my father just really helped me in, and a lesson that was invaluable to me, was the fact that my dad taught me to be consistent. My father was always the same. He had good days, he had bad days, circumstances that were up, circumstances that were down. But he was steady. He was faithful. In fact, sometimes when I think of my father, if somebody just said you could only describe him in one word, I would probably debate between the word faithful and the word consistent. And yet I can really clump them together, and so can you. If faithful is consistent, and consistent is faithful. And he was consistent in not only his words but his deeds. He had great integrity in the fact that what he said is what he did, and what he did is what he said. So he never sent our family. He never sent us curveballs. We didn't look at him and say, "What just happened there? Oh my, that doesn't seem like Dad." Now, let me just also say that my dad was human. So I'm not in any way wanting to make him a saint. In fact, I can promise you he taught me a lot of great lessons. But all the lessons he taught me weren't maybe the best lessons. So let me just give you one real quick. My father taught me how to drive fast, okay? My dad liked to speed. My brother likes to speed. My sister likes to speed. I like to speed. I'm sorry. We learned that from my dad. My dad, every other year, would buy a car. It was a ritual. Every 2 years, Dad would go down and buy a car. And we loved to go with him when he bought the car because two things. We knew it wouldn't take long. My dad made decisions very quickly. And secondly, we knew that as soon as he bought the car, we'd get in the back seat and he would take us out to Route 22, heading west out of Circleville, Ohio. And he'd turn around to the back seat, he'd look at the kids and he'd say, "Kids, let's see what she's got." He'd put that accelerator to the floor and we'd take off on that little straight road. And he'd get it up to 100 miles an hour and he'd let off the gas and kind of pull over and turn around and smile at the kids and say, "I think we got a good one. Let's take it home." That was a ritual every other year. And my father, he had a heavy foot. So I'm telling you that because I just want you to know when I'm talking about all the incredible qualities that he had some humanness to him also. He wasn't a perfect man, never even pretended to be a perfect man. He was an authentic man, not a perfect man. But when I look at my father, most of the lessons I'm going to teach you are incredibly positive and uplifting. And I just want you to know that he had a human side too. He wasn't a saint, close. It wasn't a saint. But he taught us to be consistent. And his consistency was rooted in the fact that he had a set of values that he greatly valued. And he had a set of principles that he always followed. And those principles just kept him going straight. And those values, and some of the principles, by the way, some of the values I'll be teaching you in these 3 lessons on my tribute to my father. But those principles helped him to go straight, and those values helped him to stay solid. And so therefore, when I saw my dad, everything was congruent. Everything matched up. It's been a great lesson for me because I feel that consistency is something that is an incredible way to live, but I think so many times it's kind of overlooked. I mean, we seldom get a consistency award, and I suppose if we did, it's not a sexy word. I suppose if we did get a consistency award, we might be a little ticked and say, "Come on, can't you think of better words or adjectives for me like genius or brilliant or charismatic?" I mean, consistency is it's a great word. It's a solid word, but it's not the one we strive for. When you ask people, what do you want to be in life? Very few people are going to say, "I want to be consistent." And yet, as I watched my father live for 98 years and 8 months, let me tell you what I know about consistency. It compounds. Trust me. If you are consistently good, you consistently compound goodness. And it gets better and better and better. That's a fact. I had a conversation one day with my dad. He was probably about 90. And we were talking in his office at his home. And he said, "John," he said, "isn't it wonderful? The older you get, the more a person loves people." He said, it's just been wonderful. I'm getting older, but I love more people. I love people more today than I did 20 years ago. He said, "Isn't it wonderful that as you get older, you just love people more?" And I said, "Dad, that's not true. I know a whole bunch of people. I'll bet you do too. I know a lot of people. They're getting older, and they're not loving people more. Hey, they're getting older, but they're not getting better." Now, it was true for my father because there's a principle here that I want to teach. It's about consistency. He loved people when he was young. He loved people in his middle age. He loved people when he retired. You see, my father, every step of the journey, loved people. Now, here's what I know. If you have a good quality within you, as you get older, that quality expands, it exaggerates, because one of the things that happens with aging is exaggeration. And so the qualities I have in me, if they're good, they grow and exaggerate in a positive way. And the qualities I have within me, if they're negative and bad, they also grow and exaggerate, but they grow and exaggerate in a negative way. In my book, Today Matters, which is sometimes entitled Make Today Count, I talk about the fact that that I have disciplines in my life, what I call the daily 12 disciplines. And I talk about in the book how that I think it was 3 or 4 of those disciplines I literally learned as a teenager, and about 3 or 4 others in my 20s. And I talk about when I learned these and to practice these important disciplines in my life, But the one that I learned last, the one that I worked on and fixed and improved last was my own health. And I didn't even work on it until I was 51 and I had a heart attack. I was always I thought, a healthy person. I wasn't a sickly person, that was for sure. And when I had a heart attack at 51, I had a big wake-up call, and all of a sudden I realized, John, you have to live a more healthy lifestyle. You're falling short here. So that was the last maybe good habit I formed, and I didn't form it until 51. Now here's what I want you to understand. Of all the daily disciplines I have in my life, do you know what today is my most difficult discipline? Healthy lifestyle, eating right, exercising. Why? Because for 51 years, I didn't do it. Now, it's the point that I'm making on consistency, that the earlier we become consistent in good habits, the more those good habits compound in a positive way, just as if I'm consistent in bad habits, they compound in a negative way. And my father taught me the value of good habits and living this incredible, unbelievable, consistent life. The next lesson, wow. The next lesson that I learned that just is one of the most important to me, and it's another faith lesson, so just be patient with me, is my father showed me how to share my faith in a positive way with other people. And I think the key is share my faith in a positive way, because there are a lot of people, to be honest with you, they don't do it right. And the whole foundation of my father teaching me how to share my faith in a positive way was based on the fact that he said, John, every person, they're created by God. And he said they intuitively want to know God. I mean, after all, he's their creator. He said the reason that they don't know God is because they have a wrong picture of God. And he said as soon as you share with them who God really is, and they begin to understand that with all of his goodness and all of his attributes, they'll want to know him. It's kind of like I share with people all the time, the best networking question you can ask someone is, who do you know that I should know? Well, my father loved for people to ask him that question, who do you know that I should know? Because he'd say, oh, you need to know my Heavenly Father. And he passed that on to me. And I have found that his words and his actions in sharing faith are exactly true. That people really do want to know God. They just have a wrong picture of God. And to be honest with you, if I had a wrong picture of God, I wouldn't want to know him. I think the first step in a good relationship is to know who a person really is. And if that person is a good person, you want to engage in that relationship and grow and build it. Well, it's the same way with God. Once you understand his care for you, his unconditional love for you, his forgiveness for you, I mean, my goodness. If you just took the attributes of God and just kind of stacked them up and say, would you like to know this person? The answer would be yes, 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 of course. And so my dad just shared with me and taught me how to be positive with people. And by the way, in sharing your faith, the first thing you do, more than value your faith, is you value the person again. It all comes back to valuing people. And the moment that I value you, I'm going to want to share what I call good news with you. And good news is that God loves you, has a plan for your life, and wants you to have even a better and greater life than you even want for yourself. And once you know him, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I'm going to stop here just for a second, because if I have in any way, what should I say, piqued your interest, I would like you to do something for me when I'm done maybe with this tribute to Dad, these few lessons I'm teaching in my first session. We're going to do 3 of them. I want you to go to maxwellfaith.com, because you're going to see me share with you visually the 4 pictures of God, what I've just talked about if you have the right picture of God, I think you'll want to know him. And I would just encourage you on your own time, go to maxwellfaith.com and just observe and listen. And if you decide to have a relationship with God, I just want you to know that our team will, there'll be a way for you to get involved with us for a moment, just briefly, and our team will get hold of you. and they will give you an opportunity, if you want, to just give you free resources, no strings attached, none at all. But if you're really interested in a relationship with God and having this incredible forgiveness peace, etc., then just go to maxwellfaith.com and you'll learn what to do to follow through, and we'll be able to put in your hands in a very short time some great material, a study guide, and then a special surprise for you that I think will just really help you grow in your faith. Okay. My father taught me, this is lesson, I think, number 5. My father taught me to stay focused, I've said often that what you focus on expands. I learned it from my dad. I wrote a book called Intentional Living. That book is my father. My father lived intentional. He realized that good intentions were not enough. You had to have good actions. And so intentional living is the bridge from good intentions to good actions. And my father stayed focused. My friend Dan Ryland talks about I love the phrase that Dan gave me recently. He said, pick a rabbit. Pick a rabbit. We've all heard the thing that if you chase 2 rabbits, both of them get away. Of course, you're double-minded, and I'll go for this one. And while you're hesitating, they're both down the hole. Pick a rabbit. My father knew how to pick a rabbit, and he was intentional in his priorities and in his life. I could give you so many examples of this, but I'm just going to share with you one. My father, this is interesting, my father did the grocery shopping in the family. My mom made the list out, and my father was kind of a guy of action, and he loved every Friday afternoon about 3, 4 o'clock going and getting the groceries. And he would take us with him, and we love going to, that sounds crazy, the kids want to go to the grocery store, but you never went to the grocery store with my dad. If you went to the grocery store with my dad, it was a highlight. First of all, let's go back to focus for a moment. He would share with us, he'd say, kids, most people, they go to the store every day. He said, and I don't understand why they do that. Why don't they make a list and figure out what they need for the next few days and go once a week? He said, there's no need of getting in the car and going back and forth. He said, it makes no sense at all. Why don't you just prioritize, focus, and then do it all at one time? And that's how he did the grocery shopping, and we did it on Friday afternoon. And when we went to the grocery store, the reason we loved going to the grocery store with Dad is he would take the stuff off the shelf, and I'd have a cart, my brother Larry would have a cart, and then he'd throw it to us. Oh, my goodness. Literally. He would get on one aisle, and we'd be on the other aisle. He'd throw it over the aisle, and we would catch it. We had so much fun. It was a blast. And yes, we had some broken ketchup bottles, and on the floor. And we'd have to get the manager and mop it up and clean it up and pay for the broken ketchup bottles. And that's what kept us going back, because we loved the grocery game. Now, my father understood that what you focus on expands, and so he said, go shopping once a week. But here's what he would say to us all the time. He'd say, kids, if it was important, he'd say, put it before you. And what he meant by put it before you is write it down. Write it down, put it before you. And then he wanted us really to put it on the mirror in our bathroom. Write it down, put it before you so you can see it all the time. What did he know? He knew that the more we saw maybe a quote or a thought or a statement, the more that statement would expand in our life. In fact, you'd say, put before you what you want to expand and put behind you what you want to shrink. So my dad was incredible, absolutely the very best in helping us learn how to focus in life. I just learned to pick a rabbit from him. This next lesson I'm going to share with you that Dad taught me was a life changer. There's hardly a day goes by in my life that this lesson doesn't come to play somewhere in my leadership journey, and that is Dad taught us to travel the high road. Now, in fact, he in traveling in life, he told us to take the high road, which means turn the other cheek. go the second mile, be kind to people that aren't kind to you. And he, in fact, he said not only travel the high road, but he said travel high, travel long. And when he was talking about traveling long, he'd say go the second mile. And that's a old traditional biblical Jewish kind of a deal that in those days, that if somebody asked you to go with them, you would walk with them a mile. That was what you did. That's how you served people. But if you walked with them the second mile, it was totally voluntary. They had no right to ask you, nor you didn't have any obligation to do it. And so my father was a second mile man. He would always say, travel the second mile with people. He said, there's less traffic on the second mile. I love that. Less traffic on the second. On the first mile, under obligation and rules and legalism, a lot of traffic. Second mile thins out pretty quick. So he'd say, travel the high road, be good to people that maybe aren't always good to you. And not only travel the high road, but travel long. Walk that second mile. And they also taught us to travel light. You'd think he's a travel agent, wouldn't you? Travel light. And what he meant by that is just don't carry a bunch of garbage. Don't carry a bunch of baggage. Let it go. If you're going to go mountain climbing, you don't ask the question, how much weight can I take to the top? You get rid of everything you possibly can that will be weight, so you can successfully get to the top. And my father said, you can't carry a bunch of baggage to the top of the success mountain. Forgive. Keep short accounts. It's okay. Let it go. Travel light, travel far, travel high. But it was in the high road. That's where life change really happened for me. My father was a president of a college. It's now High Christian University, and for several years. And he had on his college board 2 or 3 people that just thought it was their job to be a pain in his rear end. And honestly, they couldn't have grown the college. My father was very successful, built the college, grew it, I think, 5 times the original enrollment when he left the college, and it was just built a brand new campus, relocated it. Very successful, but he had about 3 or 4 board members that just thought it was their job to be a pain. And I knew about it because I really went to college where my dad was the president, and think about it for a moment. That's an IQ test. If you go to college where your father is the president, you increase the odds of maybe graduating from college. And so it was in my college years and in the great growing years of the school that he just got a lot of criticism from a few of his board members. And I would hear him and Mom talk about it, and it would make me angry. And I'd say, Dad, stand up. Don't let them do that to you. You're right. They're wrong. And I was kind of militant in the process. And my father would say, son, he said, I just listen. He said, I have the ability. I'm courageous. I stand up. But he said, I value people, and there's times when you just turn the other cheek and walk the high road. And I remember one night, my mother was the librarian. One night I was in the college library after hours. I had a key. Mom was the librarian. And I was clearing the back of the library just doing some study. And my father didn't know I was in the library, and he slipped into the library. It was at the end of a college board meeting. And he went clear back to a corner. He didn't see me, but he went back to a corner and knelt, and he started to pray. And my father prayed out loud. And as he prayed, he was greatly troubled over the board meeting and the difficulties that came out of it and the pain that some of these board members were causing him. And he was asking God to forgive them, and he was asking God to bless them. And I listened to my father pray probably for, 10, 12 minutes. And it changed my life. He never knew that night that I was in the library. He slipped out, and it wasn't until several years later we had a conversation. I said, Dad, I was in the library the night you prayed and asked God to bless people that were persecuting you, and they were just a pain to you. That totally revolutionized and changed my life. Today I want to talk to you about one of the attributes and contributions that leaders give other people, and that's what makes leadership so important. I would like to talk to you about the fact that leaders lift others. In other words, wherever you see a leader, the people around that leader will always go to higher ground. My friend Johnny Cash, in our time of mentoring and just talking together, constantly brings up to me in my mentoring time with him, John, I have a great desire to help other people, and I want to make their lives better for them. And he works really hard at that. And it's one of the things I greatly appreciate about him. Every time I look into his heart is to lift up other leaders. Now, we've heard the expression that it's lonely at the top. But I've always said that a good leader never says that, because think about it for a moment. If you're at the top all by yourself, you didn't lift anybody. You didn't bring anybody to the top with you. In fact, if you're only at the top by yourself, you're really not a leader. Honestly, you're just a hiker. Leaders lift other people. Recently, I was doing a lesson on fulfillment, because there are so many people, instead of living a fulfilling life, they lead and live an empty life. And I was trying to distinguish the difference between what is emptiness in a person's life and what makes them feel empty, and what is fulfilling in a person's life and what brings great joy and fulfillment to them. In that lesson, I was talking about that people that live a fulfilling life, they value people and they add value to those people. Now, that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying lifting others. If you as a leader value people and you add value to people, trust me, my friend, without any doubt, you will lift other people. I have spent my life doing that exact thing. In fact, the other day I had someone come and ask me, they said, a little bit about your journey. How did this happen that you began to be what I would call a leader that lifted other people? Well, honestly, at 75, it's easy for me to understand my life as I look backwards. It was Steve Jobs who said, when we look forward, it's hard to connect the dots. But when we look backwards, then it just is kind of natural to see how things just fell in place. In my life, back in 1973, I went to a convention in Waterloo, Iowa, and I heard Charles Tremendous Jones, and he said that I would be the same person I was in 5 years unless I met new people and I read more books. In other words, Charles Tremendous Jones said to me that the people I associate with and the books that I read are going to determine how successful I will be in life. And from that very moment, I determined that I was going to be around great people and I was going to help people become great. I've often said that when you have a great dream and you have a great team, then all of a sudden you can realize everything that you want to accomplish. Now, I've known those who had a big dream and a bad team, and that's a nightmare. So how did I lift up people? How do you lift up others as leaders? I'm going to share with you now some material, some thoughts that really I've never shared with other people before. This is for you. This is for your training. This is for your growth. This is for your development. This is to help you to be a leader that lifts up other people. So how do we do this? How do I lift others? How do you lift others? Number one, I think to lift other people, it starts with you. I think you have to have a desire to become great. You have to have a desire inside of you to do great things. I can still remember as a very young leader in my 20s, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to make a difference. I really did. That I wanted to make a difference in my life. I wanted to make a difference in your life. I wanted to make a difference in the people's lives around me. And I had this desire. It was a passion of mine. Napoleon Hill said, the starting point of all achievement is desire. I believe that with all of my heart. I have found that great people, great leaders, you don't have to motivate them. You don't have to say, hey, get up, get out of bed, get into the game. They already have that passion. They already have that desire. And I did. And so because I had this great desire, this desire to be great, I went to one of my mentors. His name was Elmer. I call him affectionately E.T. He's still alive. He's older than me. He's 90 years old. But he has been a friend and a mentor for many, many years of my life. And so I'm very, very young. I'm in my 20s, and I go to E.T. and I ask him, how do I become great? What he said to me that day was life-changing. And for, 50 years of my life, I've been following those words. Here's what he said. If you want to become great, go to great events. Seek out great people. Ask great questions. Read great books. Find great mentors. And then he said, above all, attempt to do great things. When E.T. told me that 50 years ago, I marked those words. I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to great events. I'm going to seek out great people. I'm going to ask great questions. I'm going to read great books. I'm going to find great mentors in my life, and I'm going to attempt to do great things. If you want to lift others, the first thing you want to do is just have a desire inside of you to be great. The second characteristic I think that you need to possess is you need to do what my mentor Elmer Towns told me to do as a very young leader. Go to where great people go. Wow. I have discovered that this is the secret to having a faster pace on my success journey. My mama used to talk to me and say, John, birds of a feather flock together. Average people hang with average people. People that are successful hang with people that are successful. My father knew that. And as I was growing up, he took time to introduce me to great people. Wow. I was in the 7th grade when he took me to meet his long-distance mentor himself, Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote the great book, The Power of Positive Thinking. In Columbus, Ohio, 7th grader, I met Norman Vincent Peale. When I was in the 11th grade, I met E. Stanley Jones, another great man, a great missionary, a friend of Gandhi's, a man that influenced the world, a great writer. Elmer Towns, my mentor, said and taught me at a young age what he called the hot poker principle. The hot poker principle is just very simple. If you have a fire in the fireplace, if you put the poker in the fire or by the fire, it's only a matter of time till it gets hot. If you remove the poker away from the fire, it's only a matter of time till it gets cold. And Elmer said, John, get around hot people, get around great people so you can stay hot, so you can stay passionate. That's exactly what I have done. When I was in my late 20s, I wrote a lesson that has been life-changing for many people about how to create a growth environment. In it, I just simply say, listen carefully, a growth environment is a place where others are ahead of you, where you're continually challenged, where your focus is forward, where the atmosphere is affirming, where you're often out of your comfort zone, where you wake up excited, where failure is not your enemy, where others are growing, where people desire change, and where growth is modeled and expected. Those are the 10 things that make a great growth environment. The other day, when I was preparing this lesson for you, I was looking at those characteristics of a growth environment, and all of a sudden it hit me. 5 of the 10 very essential items to have a growth environment in your life are having great people around you. Others are ahead of you. The atmosphere is affirming. Others are growing. People desire change. Growth is modeled and expected. 5 out of the 10 are specifically about great people. Mark Cole, the CEO of my companies, calls it the power of proximity. He talks about the fact that if you really want to do something great, you've got to be around great people because there is a contagiousness that happens when you're around those type of people. And so I've looked at myself and I've asked myself many times, how did I become great? And I'd have to say, without any doubt, I not only had a desire to be great, but I put myself around great people. And again, that's what's so exciting to me about this program, because you're in these lessons, you're going to be exposed to great people who have great ideas and great thinking that can really help you to become great. In my early years, when I was very young, inexperienced, and not known at all as a leader, my mentors were my books. Back then, we didn't have all the incredible technology that you have today. But I was mentored from afar by books or by tapes that I could listen to. So, if you really want to lift others up, you have to have a desire to be great, and you have to go where the great people go. Where are the great people? Thirdly, if you really want to be great and be a leader that can lift others, you have to do what great people do. Again, many times we look at great people and we say, wow, I would like to have that title. I'd like to have that position. I'd like to have that money. I'd like to have that influence. And we don't realize that all those things that we want are a result of what great people do every day. The things that we don't even see, the behind the scenes, the hidden disciplines that keep people doing the great things every day so that their greatness shows when they're out in public. A book that I grew up on and was mentored on was Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And when people talk to me about doing what great people do, I say, go to that book. And I would suggest you need, if you haven't, you need to read that book. And if you have read the book, you need to practice the 7 habits that Stephen Covey talks about, the things that you have to do to be great. What did he say? He said, number 1, be proactive. In other words, take action. There is no success, none, without action. Nobody ever reflected their way to success. Nobody ever thought their way to success. Nobody ever hoped their way to success. No one with good intentions ever had success. It takes action. Action is always associated with success. Be proactive. Number 2, begin with the end in mind. This is all about intentionality. This is all about seeing the big picture. This is all about don't do something stupid today that'll mess up the long-term journey of your life. Everything that you do, look at your dream, look at your goal, do everything with the end in mind. The third thing that Stephen Covey suggests that we do is to put first things first. In other words, prioritize your life. All leaders know activity is not necessarily accomplishment. I know a lot of busy, hardworking people that are not successful at all. So what we have to do is we have to say, what's the most important? Put first things first. Don't put first things last. Hey, put last things last. Put first things first. Number 4, Stephen Covey says, think win-win. I have lived my life following that principle. If I'm going to work with you, I'm going to ask myself a simple question. What is the win for you and what's the win for me? I never get into any relationship where I win and you're going to lose. Or I'm not going to get in a relationship where you're going to win and I'm going to lose. No, I'm going to get into a relationship where together we both are better. Together, we both win. The 5th thing that Stephen Covey talked about that was so effective is he said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. He talked about listening. He talked about caring for people in such a way that you allow them to tell their story. And you listen and care and are attentively drawing their story out. In other words, if I understand you well, you'll have a desire, because I listen and care, to understand me. But I must, again, as a leader, I must go first. So many times leaders, they just want to be understood. They want to make sure that they got their vision out, they got their directions out, and it's kind of, now listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. But if you really want to lift others and you really want to grow in this area, you don't start with yourself. You start with your people and say, okay, tell me your story. What are your dreams? What is it in your life that you would really like to do that would make a difference in people's life? I love those words. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The sixth thing that Stephen Covey talks about that is so important for us to, again, be leaders who do what great people do is he talks about synergizing. And if you really read the chapter, it's really about teamwork. It's about coming together. It's what Mother Teresa said when she said, you can do things I cannot do. I can do things you cannot do, and together we can do great things. Synergizing means that we come together as a team. One is too small of a number to achieve greatness. When we synergize, we lead people in a desired vision, but we do it together as a team. The last thing that Stephen Covey said is sharpen the saw. In other words, develop yourself personally. When he said sharpen the saw, he's talking about cutting down trees, and you all know that if I don't stop long enough to sharpen the saw, if it's not the best instrument I can possibly use to cut that lumber, it's not going to cut very well. And so we have to constantly keep sharp. We have to constantly grow. We have to constantly learn. We have to constantly improve our life. Okay, we're talking about how do we become leaders that lift others? And we've talked about so far three things. We've talked about how important it is for us to have a desire to be great. We have talked about go where great people go, and then do what great people do. Now I'm going to talk to you about number 4. Be unforgettable. Be unforgettable. My friend Jack Welch used to talk about getting out of the people pile. You see, in every organization, there are just a lot of people. So how do you and I distinguish ourselves? I mean, how do we get out of the people pile until they see us and they notice us? And what I want to share with you today is something that's very important, and it's just life-changing. If you want to get out of the people pile, just commit your life to living a life beyond expectations. I want you to exceed expectations. I want you to set your bar, your personal bar, your productivity bar, your life conduct bar. I want you to set it high. You see, only 15% of the people in life even meet expectations. So this people pile, it's just got a whole bunch of people that are just average. And 15% exceed expectations or meet expectations. And of those 15% that meet expectations, only 2% exceed expectations. So I want to encourage you in your life to live a life that says, I exceed the expectations of other people around me. In fact, the way I look at it is this. When I'm getting ready to speak for a company, I do a pre-conference call, and one of the questions I ask them is, what are your expectations of me? What do you want to see happen when I come and speak for you? And they tell me, and I write it down. Now, when they give that to me, I look at what I wrote down, and those expectations they have of me, that's not my ceiling. That's my floor. I stand on that. I make sure that's going to be done. Now I ask myself the question, how am I going to exceed expectations? How am I going to be so unforgettable that I'm irreplaceable? And they look and they say, I got to have John back because he truly does make a difference in my life. How am I going to do that? Let's review just for a second. For me to be a leader that can lift other people, I have to have a great desire to be great. I have to go where great people go, do what great people do. I have to be unforgettable, exceed those expectations. And number 5, I have to be greater on the inside than I am on the outside. Wow, this is huge. You see, when we look at successful people, what we normally do is we see what they have accomplished, the tangible things on the outside. But I am here to tell you that greatness begins on the inside first. My wonderful friend, Truett Cathy, was the founder of Chick-fil-A, this incredible, best company to work for in America restaurant chain. When Chick-fil-A was just kind of starting to get momentum, the people around him said, we need to get bigger, we need to get bigger. And Truett Cathy said, no. He said, we need to get better. He said, when we get better, when we improve ourselves, when we get better, the people, the customers, the clients, they'll insist that we get bigger. Our job is to be big on the inside. Our job is to be greater on the inside than we are on the outside. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that I'll be different than most people. For example, many people live a life of scarcity. I live a life of abundance. Most people, in relationships with others, they either take the low road or the middle road. They either kind of, well, if you'll treat me good, I treat you good. You treat me bad, I'll treat you bad. I take the high road. You see, I take the road where if you treat me bad, I'll still treat you good. I will always be bigger in my spirit and my attitude than you. Trust me. I was talking about high road the other day, and a person came up to me at the conference and said, the high road is a toll road, but the price is worth it. When they said that to me, I thought how true that is. I am always going to treat people better than they treat me. I'm always going to live a life of abundance, not scarcity. And I'm going to choose sowing over reaping. I'm always going to sow seeds of goodness into people's life. You see, most people, they get up and they look at life in that day and they say, I wonder what life is going to bring to me today. I wonder what it's going to give me. I wonder what I'm going to get out of life. That's how they think. I never think about reaping. I always think about sowing. In fact, the success of my day is determined by the seeds I sow, not by the harvest that I want to reap. So I'm going to constantly do more for others than they do for myself. I'm going to constantly be greater on the inside than I'm on the outside. Now I'm preparing you. All the things I've given you, I'm preparing you to lift other people. So number 6, live out your great vision. Now, what I mean by living out your great vision, it's one thing to tell others about your vision, but it's another thing to show others your vision. When I tell you my vision, I'm a vision caster. But when I show you my vision, I become a vision character. And when I can show and tell my vision, I become what I call a vision champion. And great people are attracted by great success. So my credibility as a leader isn't what I say I can do, it's what I actually do. So what I do is I bring people with me. The people that I'm mentoring, the people that I'm leading and lifting, I take them with me. I take them with me to have leadership experiences. I say, come and be with me and watch this and observe this. This begins absolutely life-changing. When a person sees the vision that you have created, they buy into it so quickly because now they get to be a participant of that vision. Now I get to the very essence of this lesson. If you want to lift others, you've got to develop great people. When people ask me at 75, what is the number one reason for my success? It's very obvious. I have developed great people in my life. And there are two principles for developing great people. And those two principles are, number one, growth requires people development. I have to spend time developing people. Growing organizations grow people. So growing leaders is at the top of my agenda. And personal development, my own personal growth, precedes the development of others.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.